After the battles of Lexington and Concord, everyone knew, both sides knew now, that it was a war, and now we wonder who has the best chance of winning. So let's take a quick look at Britain's strengths. Their military at the time was the best in the world. They'd had 100 years of victories, and they knew how to prepare their soldiers for battle, so they were well equipped, well disciplined, well paid, and well fed. They knew they had military that they could count on from these victories. They had leaders in the military that they could count on and knew how to manage their soldiers in battle. The British Navy had dominated the seas. Their greatest rivals, the French, they had defeated them recently. The Spanish had been their rivals. They'd had some rather stunning victories over them recently as well. And so the British Navy was known as the best in the world, and that was some of the highest technology of the time, those ships as they sailed. The British had much greater access to funds. They had more people that they could tax within their islands, and they had a richer commonwealth because they had been doing mercantilism until this point, and they had been acquiring more and more gold and more money as a result. So they could fund their armies better than anybody else really in the world at the time. In fact, they could hire mercenaries, mercenaries being hired soldiers paid to come fight for you. And they hired about 30,000 Hessians, as they were called. They came from several different places, but that's how the British knew them, were as Hessians. But the British did have some weaknesses as well. For example, in this case, they were fighting a war on another continent, North America, which was far from their home British islands. And so this meant that orders, troops, and supplies can take months to reach their destinations in the New World. In our day and age, we expect information to fly almost instantaneously. In this time, it had to get on a ship, an order be taken someplace else. A general might have to go all the way from England to the United States to be able to do their job, and that would take time. So everybody kind of accepted that it was going to take a while, but it led to a lot of confusion as well. On the American side, there was no such problem. It was also a darn difficult objective to try to achieve, because how do you win this war? How do you know that you've won? In many other countries, if you took over the capital city of London or Paris, you'd know that you'd pretty well won. You'd taken over the government. Well, the United States has no such centralized government as we do now, and it wasn't even the United States. At this time, it was a series of colonies that weren't entirely sure how they were going to work together, and mixed in among that were a lot of people that were actually still in support of England. So there was no one place that they could attack. Eventually they did attack and take Philadelphia, but that doesn't end the war by any means. So it's a very difficult objective, and they have to persuade the colonists to give up their claims of independence when they can just fade into the hills and continue to fight as long as they'd like. There was another huge problem for the British, and that was the geographic vastness of the colonies. They're just huge compared to England itself, which is a series of islands. This extends all the way from Maine down and to Georgia at the time, and that's a lot of different types of terrains and a lot of different places to conquer. So no one target to take down. They could take no one target down like a capital city that would help them win the war. They also needed their armies elsewhere, so the armies needed to defend Britain were elsewhere, like in Ireland and France, and they could only spare a certain amount to go to fight in the colonies. Another problem that the British had was that their government was not well run at the time. The British citizens themselves were divided about fighting this war. British generals that were chosen to go over and represent them there were also not their best. So if that gives you a sense of the strengths and weaknesses of the British, now let's take a quick look at the colonists' strengths and weaknesses. First of all, among their strengths were this feeling that they were fighting for a grand cause. They were fighting for their rights, their independence, and their liberty. And so they felt like they were doing the right thing. And that's an advantage, a strength for them. Also, while their leaders were inexperienced, they were surprisingly competent and/or, as I say, quick learners. George Washington and Benjamin Franklin are fine examples of each. George Washington listened to the people around him. He made plenty of mistakes, more of them at the beginning than at the end, and eventually became pretty good at it. He never gave up. He had a lot of confidence. Benjamin Franklin was another fine example. Both of them are heroes of the war for different reasons. Benjamin Franklin goes to Paris and negotiates a treaty, and he learns how to become a fine diplomat. Before that, he'd been an inventor and a publisher, but now he becomes a diplomat to be reckoned with, and he manages to get the French behind the colonists and behind the effort to defeat England, and that's ultimately what does it for the fledgling United States. Eventually, among the colonists' strengths was what I just talked about. They received support and aid from France, who, were rivals for England, and so they were convinced to help out, if for no other reason than to embarrass the British. And also helped a lot that these colonists were fighting defensively on their own soil. They didn't have to go anyplace else to fight. They were defending their own people, their own families, their own cities. They also knew their way around. They knew about the terrain in the area, and they knew how to fight there, as opposed to the British, who were not fighting under those same circumstances. But of course, the colonists had many weaknesses of their own. They were badly organized for war. They really didn't organize at all, hardly. It was hard to get funding or troops or weapons or clothing to an army when it was when the people supporting it were divided among 12 and 13 colonies spread all up and down the eastern seaboard. They were almost fatally lacking in unity too, because they still had many royalists among the population. Royalists were people that still believed that England should be the ruler here, that the king should be the one that made decisions, not the colonists themselves. And they fought almost the entire war before they adopted a constitution, and that was the Articles of Confederation in 1781. There was also a great deal of sectional jealousy, which we saw earlier in the course when we discussed the 3 different kinds of colonies. That continued. You have the northern colonies, who are much more focused on trade, and the southern colonies much more focused on agriculture, and there's a difference there, and they have different objectives, and that creates jealousy among them. Among the other colonists' weaknesses were economic difficulties of mercantilism, which had drained away much of the gold and silver to England. They tried printing paper currency, but it depreciated quickly, which just means that the paper that it was printed on was more valuable as paper than it was as money. So people would actually use money to paper their walls because that was cheaper than going out and buying paper to paper the walls. That's called inflation, when the money you're printing is not worth much and continues to be worth less each day. The colonists also had a near-fatal shortage of military supplies, especially firearms themselves. There was, for example, no gun factory in the colonies at all. And when militiamen reported for duty, only 1 in 12 reported with their own musket in hand. This may be part of the reason why we hear about a militia should be well armed and should be allowed to have their own muskets, because they needed it. They needed their soldiers to report that way to be able to fight. Other supplies were also scarce. You're going to hear over and over about bloody snow, for example, because they did not have adequate shoes for the soldiers. Uniforms. That was very difficult for the troops, particularly to fight in the winter, because they lacked what they needed, both uniforms to identify themselves, they had to find other ways, and clothing just to keep warm and just to be able to continue to stay in good health enough to fight. They lacked military training, so they'd had just a little bit, just some military training, and this made the troops unreliable. The troops did not even know how to maintain a sanitary campsite, or a site where they would wait for battle. And this made for a lot of sickness in the ranks. It really plagued the troops around Boston, and it plagued the troops around New York as they prepared for the British there. At any given time, about half of the soldiers were sick, and pretty seriously sick, and this would extend up to the officers. So sometimes some of the best officers were unavailable for battle because they were just too sick, because they weren't maintaining the kind of sanitary site that they needed to be able to avoid infecting each other with illness. Beyond that, American profiteers, that is, people who wanted to sell their goods for higher prices, undermined the effort here. They found that they could sell to the British because the British could pay in gold. And so the troops did not have access to the same resources here that the British did, because the British could go up the road and they could buy food from a farmer and give him gold, as opposed to the colonists, who could give him some of that paper that wasn't worth all that much, or an offer to pay them later. And so you can see that this was another weakness for the colonists. So the question becomes, who do you think would win this war based on these sets of strengths and weaknesses? At the beginning, at the onset of the war, the British really believed everything was rolling for them. They were so sure that all they would have to do is show up in their red uniforms, and the colonists would fold, that they would give up, that they would run in fear, and that would be the end of the revolution. That from their point of view, all they really had to do was send a certain number of troops over here to the right places, and the inept colonists would run in fear. As you know, that was not the case. That's not how it all turned out. And that will be the next stage of our story. What happens now with, given these strengths and weaknesses? What do the British choose to do to try to win this war, and what do the colonists choose to do to try to hang on and win the war themselves? And so the next stage is the Siege of Boston.